Acá que hago yo, ya te digo, cuando venga el video, cuando termine el video me saludo. Buen día. Bueno, vamos a comenzar nuestro próximo taller. Marketing legal, estrategias.
We go with our second panel, legal marketing strategies to position the offices in terms of digital affairs, and this will be moderated by López and Marcos Samper. We'll give you the presentation, and afterwards we will begin with our conversation.
Marketing legal, estrategia.
Legal marketing, digital strategies to strengthen the exposition of law firms. Juan Carlos Samper. We are Content, Colombia. Moderator, Edna López, a major from Mayora IP, SA, El Salvador. Hello, welcome to all of you to this panel. As they were mentioning, digital marketing strategies to strengthen or to enhance the exposure of law firms. And this marketing strategy depends on different experts, and in this sense, the expert in marketing are leveraging in multiple strategies to be able to position or enhance the brands that we would want to enhance. This panel will allow us to understand the outbound and inbound of marketing and its effectiveness for law firms. Now, what it looks is to expose brand paying. The most common ones is Google Apps, Facebook Apps, Google Display, amongst others. Now, the inbound marketing looks for this same diffusion, be able to take content to the public without paying, and this is done through emails, social media, amongst others. It is an honor to count today with Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos, thank you very much for being here. Juan Carlos is an industrial engineer from Colombia, CEO of We Are the Content, the first marketplace of marketing of multimedia content, audio, text, video, and design from the Hispanic market. He was a creator of companies like Net Design, Kryptonita Digital, NetBangers, and Network and iNetwork. This last company in 2012 made part of Batanga Media, the biggest company of digital media, independent digital media of the region. Juan Carlos is a speaker, professor, and he is a reference in digital marketing in Latam. Welcome, Juan Carlos. Okay, Edna, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for being here with us today. To be honest, I feel kind of strange in a law congress and an attorney congress. It's strange for me, but I am honored. And I honestly do expect that you'll enjoy this small speech that I will be giving. If we could please put the video, if you're so kind. Please look at the title of my speech. Brands as Media. The real need in 2022. And I say 2022 because it's today. It's not for the future. It's what's happening now. That's where I want to start. And I love this slide that I saw just some days ago, where, as you might realize, most of the people believe that creating content or content creation is easy. And they're completely mistaken. What I want to show you today is why it's so important for all of you to start thinking in a different way. For those that do not know, I am what we call a boomer entrepreneur, 52 years, father to Paula and Miguel, and I precisely loved in this article, there was a text that demonstrates that people like me that have a bit more of experience and less hair, of course, this helps us for the different companies to have better outcomes. Just as Edna mentioned, I have created 8 companies. I'm in my 9th company now. I've been an entrepreneur all my life. And I want to start with this. Here I can see that there are certain people that didn't even know what fax was. You don't know what fax was. People remember what fax. How did the fax work? Can you tell me? How can you define what a fax was? It was a device of communication where a law firm was selling a designer to organize a brochure, and he made them write very well, law firm, so that on the other side, the people could know, okay, I'm gonna help you with your trademarks and everything, and then you got a list of papers. You picked everything, and then all those papers were thrown into the rubbish. That was a way in which the brands transmitted information before. But we're mentioning that in the 90s, the brands really had, as you might know, 8 ways of transmitting information. These ones. But today, reality is completely different. Can any of you tell me what Twitch is? It's a streaming platform. Are you active in Twitch? You're just starting. Okay. Could someone rise his hand if they know what Twitch is? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no more than 15 people that know what Twitch is, and I'll give you the news. I am the 16th, and I'm one of those old guys, those young guys that are combing gray hair. But there are many others that should know what Twitch is. And to be honest, Twitch nowadays is one of those platforms that are having a huge explosion. You know the phenom of TikTok and everything that's happening, but Twitch nowadays, and the generation said, Twitch is a way in which the brands communicate with the users. Interestingly enough, with a case as Twitch, where then I want to invite you to download the app so you know what I'm talking about. Let's say that the most interesting factor, and I'm going to give you a case. Pepsi community, because I remember specifically about this, they showed me this case last week, has 30 followers. A brand like Pepsi, 30 followers. And the greatest streamer or Twitcher, let's say, today has the rights of UEFA for Europe. Just one person. Hey, we're not talking about a TV channel. We're talking about a person. He has the rights of UEFA for Europe. This shows us that everything has changed radically, and it will continue changing for all of you. It does not only change for us in the world of marketing, it also changed for all of you in the world of lawsuits. So where is the story going? Today a brand has 100 medias to be able to communicate, and each day we're getting new platforms. So where are we going with this? We're going to this in the sense that the great paradigm that brands and media today have the same challenges. And which are these challenges? On one side, the challenge of brands is to build audiences to be able to sell products and services. And on the other hand, media need to build audiences to be able to sell subscriptions and advertises. Each one of the different law firms in which you work are a brand. Each one of you is a brand. Therefore, the great challenge is that in the sense that the communication media keeps growing, people are becoming more difficult to be found. Let me tell you, if you're interested in reaching the corporate VPs of the different organizations, that's a titanic task to do. And if it's difficult with them, this will keep on becoming a more difficult task. Therefore, I want to tell you something. Many of you have within your company something that we would call a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. This position, Chief Marketing Officer, has to change, and it has to become a Chief Marketing Technology Officer for a simple reason, because these marketing heads have to become extremely good in technology. They have to be wonderful in content creation, and they need to handle data and analytics at perfection. So this position, the or the person of marketing that you hire within your organizations cannot simply be a person of traditional marketing. It needs to be a person of marketing with an extreme and broad knowledge in technology. That's what will guarantee success, and that will allow you to be highlighted within all this ecosystem. So what's the job of this Chief Marketing Technology Officer? On one hand, they have to try to obtain the credibility of all your law firms, and he has to work every day building their own audiences. And I'll explain what this means. Those are the two key factors for these officers. And the challenges are that they have to handle data very well. They need to learn how to create marvelous content, and they must also know how to revise their analytics perfectly. The reason that I mention is because this will be the only way to build your own audiences. So why is it fundamental for a brand? And when I talk about this, a brand is any of those law firms that you are presiding. Why do you have to think in media in the current context? The first reason, and I don't know if this is clear for all of you, but I would like to know whom of you see TV. TV, and I'm not talking about Netflix, I'm talking about TV, classic TV. 7 people. Who see Netflix? Wow, that's the reason. That's the reason. Very clear. TV keeps losing audience, and they will continue. This trend will continue. What happened with the pandemic, with the printed media? They went down. It's a reality. New generations are not consuming the media as we did it before. So a marketing person cannot think on the same way or in the same lines that they thought before. They need to have a radical change. So the first reason that a brand has to think as a media is precisely because the audiences are fragmented, divided. They're completely divided. So just as I showed, Twitch is coming. People started with Facebook, they went to Instagram, from Instagram to TikTok, and from TikTok they're going into Twitch, and now with the phenom of Elon Musk, the people from Twitter are going into another platform that is called Komodo, I believe. I'm sorry, I don't remember correctly the name. I don't know if you already know about this case, but the topic is that all the audiences migrate. And this takes us to have an important challenge if you want to attain that profile we all would like to have. Second point, I don't know how much you know in terms of how Google works, how that model of advertising of Google works, the model of publicity of Google, if you have realized. I don't know if it's very clear. Nonetheless, these first 4 positions, normally in Google, you have these 4 positions that are called announcements. It's like a bidding. The one that pays the more will have a higher probability of appearing in the first position. So if someone goes into Google and they write lawyers of intellectual property, we can have here 4 attorneys, 4 lawyers. The one that pays the most will appear in the first position. As it's a bidding model, the value of appearing there grows in an average of 27% year to year, 27% from year to year in an increase of value. Now, what we want to say with this is that if you analyze, and allow me to give you these numbers, let's suppose that in Mexico we have 200,000 people monthly that are writing intellectual property. Here we can get the first 4 lawyers that are promoting themselves, and above this, the people will make an average 2.8% more of clicks. So if there's 100,000 people that are looking for lawyers of intellectual property, within the first positions, the click average is of 2.8%. Now, if 90% of that money is invested in Google in the part of advertising, nonetheless, I'll give you some information. Seemingly in the organical part, which is framed in purple, people make 62% of click over everything that is in purple. This means that the people trust more in whatever is organic than whatever is paid. Now, the unfair part of this is that 10% of the money is only being invested in the purple part. 90% of the money is invested in the red part. This implies that what I'm talking about today is how to achieve or how to obtain the apparition of your law firms in the purple part, not in the red one, because the red one is the one that you have to pay for. Just to give you some information, if you could appear in the first position in purple, in that first organic position, 30% of the people that are looking for lawyers of intellectual property will go into the first position, which is organic. 30%. So once again, the red part, which is paid, 2.8%. The first organic position is 30%. The second position is 15, and the third one 10. Therefore, why am I talking about the importance of creating our own audiences? What I am saying is that the brands require to not depend on the paid part. What they need is to depend on the organical part. That's what I'm going to precisely be talking about today, for a simple reason. Because you cannot continue. Let's say that no brand can grow their budget of marketing 30% per year. No brand will have the capacity to look for all the people that are migrating in social media to see where they are. What we need is to develop a strategy of content. That's what we're going to be talking about. So that people come to you willingly, which means that they go to the purple side without having any kind of investment. Therefore, this is another plot that just confirms the numbers that I just gave you. It seems that the first position is between 35 positions, second position between 10 and 15, third position between 6 and 10%. So there are additional reasons in the sense that the budget should increase 30% to be able to appear in the first positions all year long, that the audiences are fragmented, divided. And the most important part for all of you is that if you develop a strategy of contents for the different law firms, the cost of a visitor or the cost of a qualified lead could be up to 99% more or less expensive than paid publicity or advertisement in Facebook or in Google. And I believe this is something that calls the attention of all of you. And I don't want to complicate you at the moment, but I don't know if in any of the speeches you have spoken about the world without cookies and the first party data. Has someone spoken about this, Edna? I don't know. Has someone spoken about this topic? Does someone know what it means to have a world without cookies? Okay. This is very important for all of you. It's very important. Each time you go to any page in the universe today, in the moment that you go in, this page will put in your computers what they call a cookie. Now, I believe you have seen all the regulation, especially in Europe. There's a regulation with the topic of cookies in terms of all the personal information, about data, and everything. What will happen, and Google already announced this, is that in December of 2023, Google will end with the possibility of the brands adding cookies within the computers of the users or the equipment of the users. As these brands won't have the possibility to track us, to make tracking to be able to know which are our tastes or interests. If the brands are not concerned in obtaining first-hand information of their users, it will be impossible for digital marketing to operate as it's operating today. This will bring very important implications, and I just want you to remember this name because for you it will be very important, and I believe that's where you have a big business opportunity, and it's what we call CDPs. CDPs mean customer data platforms. These are platforms that will be picking from different input points, which means from a POS system, from the website of a brand, from a call center. They gather information, store it, and that information might be used in an efficient manner. This is why I don't want to bring any more complexity, but I do want to let you know that it's important for you to assess this topic of a world without cookies and the implications it will have for different brands. Another reason to build and have your own audiences is because if you do it, you'll be able to build relationships at a short, medium, and long term with their users. And finally, we need to have a strategy of content in different formats. This is what we call a multimedia strategy. which means that I need to have text, but I also need to have video, audio, and I need to have a podcast. For example, you could say, okay, how can a podcast be applied to the industry of intellectual property? Very simply, you can create a podcast where you have speakers and people that explain others in different countries how the topic of intellectual property works, what risks might exist with topics of counterfeiting. There are many things behind, and towards the end, this allows a brand to start building the audience in a very assertive and organized way. And if you say, well, what really calls my attention is to know how I can use and organize my brand so it becomes in a media. The first thing I would like to tell you and let you know is that nowadays I can tell you 90% of the digital agencies only think in how to administer your social network and how to put publicity in Facebook and Google. That's it. And what I want to tell you is that if you want to become in media, this goes beyond than Google, Facebook, and social media. Here you might see what the digital ecosystem is and what the digital ecosystem should be. Here you might realize that the first element, and I have to tell you, well, you need to have a website, a wonderful website. And when I say wonderful, what I talk about is the speed of download. And why is it important to have the download speed? For a simple reason. A website needs to download in a maximum of 3 seconds. Remember that number, 3 seconds. Google said, I won't continue sending people to websites that will take 15, 20 seconds to download because the user just gets bored and leaves. Google makes effort sending you people that are interested in intellectual property. They go into your website takes more than 15 seconds to load, and then Google lost the effort of sending you people. So Google said, okay, we're going to pull out something that is called Core Web Vitals, and one of the most important metrics is please revise your speed and tell the people that are in charge of this, how long does it take for my web page to download? More than 3 seconds? Turn on your alarms. So you need to have a website that technically works perfectly. From all the variables that there could be, please check in the first instance the topic of speed. If I'm going to become in a media, that we will go more in deep in this topic in a moment. If I'm going to transform myself, I need to have a strategy in audio, a strategy of marketing influencing. I need to have a strategy in social media. I need to have a CRM platform. I need to have mobile, email, and a fundamental point, what is called SEO. SEO means search engine optimization. And this is the most important element that I need you to have in your mind. You can have a wonderful web page, but if the web page doesn't have any content, we will go more deep in this part. If the page doesn't have any content, they won't be able to appear in the purple side. What really makes a huge difference for your websites to appear in that purple side is called the content that you can develop for Google to see value in your page and put it above the main journals of the countries where you're located. Can that be done? Yes. Above Wikipedia? Yes, of course. The point is to understand how to do it. But to be able to obtain what I just showed, there's a constant, and it's that each contact point needs to have content. And I'm not talking about a content that saying that my law firm is called X and I do this. No. Content is talking about what is intellectual property. What requisites does it have? Taking the case of Edna, what requisites do we have in El Salvador, for example, to be able to pull ahead a brand? What risks does it have to trademark? These are contents that a person that wants to understand about intellectual property want to find. Your law firms need to have this information and much more information that I will be mentioning in just a moment. So the first thing, I want you to understand the concept of what content marketing is. Content marketing has an objective, and it's focused in the sense that you do not have to pay for people to be able to know your law firms and your brands. The question is really, how do I create content that solves problems to the different users that are within the networks? So just as I mentioned here, the content marketing looks for relevant content that's entertaining, That's interesting. No advertising to be able to achieve that people go into your websites of your brands. Now, the main premise here is that the content that I need to develop and that I need to upload into my webpage must be educational content. It must not be commercial content, just as I mentioned. What is intellectual property? What does it work for? Where can it be applied? Which are the categories? Everything that comes around. But here we have another element that we must take into account. I cannot create content by intuition. Please take this into account. Yeah, let's create content of what intellectual property is. No. Here we would have another variable that is quite interesting, and it's data. Nothing from the content must be created without data. And what is data? Allow me to show you. You must be clear between content marketing, content branding, and storytelling. And what does it mean? Just as I build this table, the content marketing is basically educational content, the branded content is commercial content, and the storytelling is the emotional content. Now, the content marketing is looking to build your own audience. The branding content uses audiences from other media. In the case of content branding, let me give you this example. You love, because what I'm seeing in the world of law firms is that there is a topic of recognition. So there's nothing more exciting than being shown in each one of the journals of your own countries and telling that you're the brand of intellectual property that is the most known. That's branded content. I can pay for a reporting to appear in a journal, and that's valid. No one says that it's not there. In the difference of content marketing, what I'm trying to do with this content marketing is for my people to reach my website because I'm giving them value information. And Google, in this case, considers that the information that I have on my website is really important. Difference with storytelling. I don't know if you have seen this, but there is a brand that I love in storytelling that is IKEA. IKEA, each December, creates videos that make people cry. I don't know if you've seen them. They're beautiful videos. That's emotional content. It's how I'm able to connect emotionally with a brand. And finally, towards the end, we must mention that the difference of the content with the branded and the storytelling is that the content marketing within its content has to live in the websites that belong to your law firms. In the case of branded content, the content lives in media where they have audiences. Here, for example, I believe that there is a journal that is called Ámbito Jurídico. Here in Colombia, I think it's called like that. So I may pay Ámbito Jurídico so they can make like an advertising reportage of my law firm, and that's valid. But the important factor today is how to create a strategy of content marketing so you don't depend on how much has to be invested in media so that the brands can really be remembered and that they have high reputation. To attain what I'm mentioning, do not forget that your greatest asset will be the website, not social media. Pay attention to this. Your greatest asset is your website, not social media or social networks, because the social media or social networks are not yours. One thing is that you love to see yourselves in social networks, but it's not yours. And the real message here is that the objective must be the spinal cord, or the spinal cord of a digital strategy is the website. And social media or social networks will become in platforms of amplification of this content. It's very important to take this into account. If the content is done correctly, and we will be talking about this, if the content is done correctly, you will not depend on how much advertisement is invested in your website. If the content is done correctly with the necessary SEO techniques, the search engine optimization techniques, the bot of Google will understand your web page and it will add you by itself in the first positions in the search content. But that's obtained with the content, not the one that pays the most, as most of the people believe. This doesn't have to do anything with money. What's the objective that Google has? Can someone tell me? What's the real objective of Google? Can someone tell me what's the objective, the aim of Google? What would you say? What's the aim of Google? What's the business that Google handles? What would you say? Facilitate searches. Yeah, but what's the business that Google has there? What's their income? Advertising, announcements. So you would say that the business of Google is to add brands in different positions. Yes, if I look for ASIPI, probably the first option is to have a CP in the first position, not to appear in the second page in the 10th position. Why do you think that Google will put you in the page 10 and not in the page 1? Because I didn't pay enough? That's what most of the people believe, and that is not right. Now, the business that Google has is to organize world's data. Now, what happens is that organizing the world's data, they got on a side-to-side business. Imagine that the person that paid the most would appear in the first organic position, and it was not coherent with what the people were looking for. Each point of participation in the business of browsing that Google loses costs them $100 million. So Google does not have the luxury of adding outcomes to the person that pays them more, the company that pays them more. They have to put in the results the ones that are more relevant, not the most searched one. No, because not necessarily that you're being the most searched on makes you the most relevant one. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So, what I want you all to understand is that this is not going against the marketing of lawsuits to your lawsuits offices. It's like doctors, right? Creating advertisement about yourself is not very well seen. And I believe that in the world of law, it's the same thing. A brand that makes an advertisement is not so well seen. So what I want to show you here is that this is not what it's about. This is not about paying. This has to do that the content that you're publishing in your pages are relevant enough to convince Google that that content is what the people are looking for. So when I say that digital content does not depend on the paid site, I'm talking precisely about that. And it's that in Google, I will not appear if my content is not good. I will appear if my content is great and not if I pay. Now, there are positions where you can pay more, but you'll need to be increasing 30% your budget year by year, and it says clearly that it's an advertisement, it's an announcement. What I'm trying to tell you is how to appear in the first position where you don't have to make any kind of advertisement. So to appear there, I want to show you some cases. Tasty. What Tasty did was that they built an astronomical audience, and when they had this audience, they started developing products and services. Therefore, they developed books, clothes, kitchen batteries, and today Tasty sells a lot of things. So what Tasty did was to build an audience, and afterwards they started selling products and services.
That's a valid model. Additional to Tasty, this is the case of a telephone company, Telefónica, basically said, I have to reach the CPOs and the CIOs of the organizations. And so I'm going to create a website called Digital Report Digital, where I'm going to publish content that is attractive to CPOs and CIOs of organizations. And so the content was published and used on social networks as platforms to amplify that content. And so if the article was big data, and so in LinkedIn they would publish that data, so they would arrive at the digital report data. And so when people arrived and said, you want to receive the newsletter and information, please register. So a scenario is I can create a separate brand, as I'm showing you here, in this case, Digital Report, or, I'll explain this later. Which of you is a mother with small children? Do you know Baby Center? Does any of you know Baby Center? You know Baby Center. Do you know who it belongs to? Baby Center is the community, the largest parent community in the world. And that's Johnson & Johnson. It's not media. So Baby Center is a website that's separate. No one knows that it's Johnson & Johnson. And what Johnson & Johnson does is whenever you register, you say when you told them when your baby's going to be born, and they have information on when your baby will be born, how many weeks pregnant you are. They have all of your information. So if Johnson & Johnson wants to communicate with you, it's simple because they know how to find you. If they want to share information about Neutrogena, they can send you an email. Now, what relation does that have with the world of intellectual property? It's exactly the same. Every day you need more clients. All of you. There isn't anyone here who would ever say that you don't. The only way is to change the chip, and it's to lead you exactly to that. Because you have to start to think. If you build a digital asset, a separate digital asset, things that this will cost more money, or within my digital asset, when I develop this, it's within my website, I'll create a section which is called blog, where in that section called blog, I start to upload content that responds to the needs of the users. In this case, this is a real example of a digital report, which is the Telefónica website. As you can see, it went from 6,500 people per month to nearly 100,000 in 10 months. And so what content was created? What's big data? What are the 6G networks? What is it used for? What big data is for? All the types of subjects related to the user profile. And so you can do this exactly the same in the world of intellectual property. And so what I've just mentioned, this is the case of Baby Center. Baby Center, the last time I pulled up the reports, we're entering over 10 million people per month. Johnson & Johnson was spending $7 million per month creating content. So I either create a separate website with a name that doesn't identify me if I don't want it to, or I create the content within my website. What type of content do I create? I'll show you how to make decisions on what type of content to create. This is a software where what I just shared, the traffic that was received per month and their monthly earnings. This is a local brand that basically said, no, I won't create a separate site. Within the site where we have all of the varieties of oil, I'll create a section which was called Soy Gourmet, where there are recipes using that oil, all sorts of work for housewives, but none of the texts talks about the benefits of the gourmet oil, because that's not what it's about. It's about creating content that is attractive and interesting for users, for people who, so the people who enter Google can find a solution to what they're looking for on our website. There is a complicated matter that you have to go through. It's the case of laboratories, pharmaceutical labs. This is the case of Glaxo, where Glaxo knows that they cannot talk about asthma products. So what Glaxo does in this case is they create a site called asthma.com, where nowhere does it say that Glaxo is the owner of asthma.com, and they post content on everything that happens to people with asthma. We just created for a company in Mexico called One Touch, the glucometers, another site called mundosinlimites.com.mx, where people who suffer diabetes can find all sorts of content around diabetes, but nowhere do you see One Touch except in the banners. But within the content, they never talk about the benefits of glucometers due to the regulations that you know in the different markets. We also have General Mills for the Spanish-speaking market, created QueRicaVida.com, created for the American market, DBSP.com. And so they create digital assets aside from the brands in order to capture an audience interested in what they need to sell and thereby create a relationship. And so the case that I showed you at the Telefónica Hoy created a site called Empresas related to what I just mentioned, and they talk about all sorts of content for the sites and CIOs of organizations. This site nowadays is visited by 1 million people per month. This is larger than many of the journals or newspapers and all in every country together, and this is important. And to achieve what I just mentioned, the only way to achieve it is by having an effective content strategy. Many people say, should I have internal writers within my company, and should I have a team? It's valid. A lot of people prefer to have their internal teams. There are cases like yours where it is convenient to have someone who knows how to write very well and who has experiences on intellectual property. Or we can recur to models in which you can outsource. What we did in We Are Content was that we set up a platform where we have 5,000 content providers, but on specialized subjects like yours, it's not so easy to find lawyers who can write about intellectual property. So my invitation would be for you to have your people in-house that can write with the necessary techniques and know how to create content so that clients may arrive. And I think that that's the most important point, and I've said it several times. The objective of this is for people to arrive, not for you to have to search for them. And so if you want to go set this up, we have to set up a team, like basically a media team, and that's valid. There are brands that consider that possibility, and there are teams that prefer to not get involved in that, but instead to outsource content production. The reasons for outsourcing could be that basically if you do it in outsourcing, it becomes a variable cost. You have access to professionals in different fields to write about different subjects. The learning curve is much faster if you outsource. It's important for someone within your dispatches to have the capacity to make decisions and decide whether or not they like the subject or not. The importance, if you have an outsourcing, is that normally there's support to evaluate organic positioning. There's a set of important variables. I'd like to make you realize, I know many of you are still obsessed with social networks, and many of you continue to post things on social networks continuously. And what I'd like to say is that this is how long the content lasts when you post it on social networks. On Twitter, it's 18 minutes. On Facebook, 5 hours, 21 on Instagram, 24 on LinkedIn, 20 days on YouTube, 4 months on Pinterest. And if you have your own content on your website, here it says 2 years. 2 years is the minimum. It will never stop generating qualified leads if you create a good content strategy. So this is why I said post the content on your websites and use social networks as platforms to amplify the content. What does this mean? I post an article on what are the 5 tips for the dispatch of lawyers on intellectual property. So we give you real tips, and then I enter LinkedIn and I post here telling people, would you like to read the article, this article that reads about the 5 tips to select the best dispatch for intellectual property? I put it on the company profile such that if someone wants to read the article, they have to click, and this has to go to the website of the dispatch. When people arrive at the website of the dispatch, we can say, would you like to register for our newsletter to receive periodic information on subjects related to intellectual property? The person enters, inputs their email. And so basically they have the email from this interested person. They've brought the people from LinkedIn to take them to their website, and so you start to have an astronomical value here because you start to gather data from people who can fit the profile. From there on, how to pull up the complementary data. There are several strategies, and this is what we mentioned at the beginning. If I'm able to obtain an email later on, I can develop, for example, an ebook. There's no better format. There's no better format for gathering leads than an ebook or a guide. And so I can develop an ebook called The 10 Requirements to Register a Brand in Central America. Would you like to download it? Name, last name, what's your position, what time you get up, what time you go to bed. If someone wants that ebook, They will give you all of that information. No one will say, no, I'll only give you 5. No, if you want this ebook, give me all of this information. So with a text, to get the user from LinkedIn, where they're taken to the website, they obtain their data, they send an email, do you want this ebook, the best tips to register, give us your name, last name. Now they have your information, know that you're the vice president of corporate affairs for whatever company. And so they've been able to capture a lead just through content, no publicity. And so they don't have the reputation problems. It was all just through content, through value content. And I'll show you here. We know that people love videos, and we can develop text. I'm talking about tips for registering a brand in Central America, and after I create that text, it's published on the blog. Then they can record a video where the person or the director of the dispatch can record a video where this person explains to the audience what the requirements are for registering a brand in Central America. That video can be transformed into 5 short videos and posted on Instagram. You can create the video and load it to YouTube. After YouTube, you can even create a podcast talking about the requirements. So from a text, we can generate 9 different forms of content. Why is this important? Because some audiences like certain formats, other audiences like other formats. And so it's very important to keep in mind that the starting point for a content strategy is ideally text formats. And I'll show you how that works. So if this sounds interesting to you and it seems logical, how is it done? First, the definition of the objectives is truly important because the formats depend on the objectives. Now, what does that mean? All of you need leads. All of you need new people interested in the services that you provide. And so the leads are not obtained with videos or articles. They're obtained with formats that force people to register. Ebooks, guides, lists, webinars. The subject of webinars for you should be fundamental, because if you want to attend the webinar we're going to give for free on intellectual property, register, name, last name, telephone, what time you get up and what time you go to bed. So the webinars, ebooks, guides, lists are spectacular for gathering leads. That is not achieved through articles or videos on social networks. That is not obtained in that manner. So the objectives allow us to define the formats. Once I have the formats defined, there's something important that comes next, which is the design of the content strategy. I said some time ago that please don't think of creating content by intuition. That's the mistake that 90% of companies make
Empiezan a crear una sección dentro de su sitio que se llama blog.
when they start to create a blog. The first thing I want to say is we have to think, and this is good for you to know. Unfortunately, I have to mention it. I wish that I didn't have to, but it's important for you to understand how for Google works, how this works for Google. If you want to be positioned above the keyword, the keyword is the way that we search in these engines. If I want to be positioned on this word intellectual property in Colombia, Peru, and Spain, in whichever country, I must first create a text, a marvelous text, on intellectual property. Marvelous is basically very profound on intellectual property. Better than what you would find when you search for intellectual property and see who is at the first position. The first thing is the quality of the content. We can beat Wikipedia. Yes, you can. Make a better text than Wikipedia talking about intellectual property. So why do we have this pyramid? Because I have to create long content and short content. That long content on intellectual property will help me, undoubtedly, to tell Google I know what I'm talking about. Remember, Google needs to guarantee that whoever's in the first position is the best content possible. So we'll create very important content And I have to create smaller content on subtopics. Who regulates intellectual property, for example? And there's a detail here. Through those texts, we have to add hyperlinks to the longer text. So wherever the word intellectual property, wherever the words arrive, we would add links. What is a link? It's a photo. And so this will clarify for Google. So that's the one that will receive the most links. And so this is why it's so important to understand. I can't create a single text. I have to create several. And in order to do that, I need someone to write that. And so if I don't have someone to write it, well, obviously I won't be able to win that game. And so what it's important to take into account is that we have this methodology. Whoever wants to go into, I have several webinars that are on the content on YouTube. Whoever wants to can see them. And now the most important point comes up. What do you write about? And when I say that you can't do it by intuition, it turns out defining the topics has to be based on data. What data platforms are there? There's a free one, which is Google Trends.
Gratis, que es el Keyword Planner de Google, que nos da la información.
There's another, which is the keyword planner from Google. Gives us information on what users search for in each country. So I pulled this up. Hopefully, well, I think you can't see it from the back, but I'll give you an example. Here at the top, it says the keyword lawyers. So I tell the software, the keyword software, lawyers. How many people search for this keyword in the country? And so let's say I use this for the case of El Salvador. So the word lawyers on Google is searched by 1,100 people per month. Do you remember what percentage of people click if you get to the first position? 30%. So I have to have clarity that on that subject, if my content is marvelous, it's not that 1,100 people will read it. The maximum potential would be 330 people. So if the maximum potential is 330 people, returning to the story, if the brand is Pepsi, 330 people is not significant. But for you to have 330 people show up to your website in a month who are looking for lawyers, that must be interesting to you. So we have to define very well what subjects I'm going to develop based on the search volume present in each country regarding the terms that you want to be positioned on. And so this is why it cannot be done by intuition, because if you do it by intuition, yesterday I had an appointment with a radiologist, and the radiologist told me, well, look, no, I know how to make content. And I said, okay, why did you make content on prostatic hyperplasia? It's literally what I'm saying. Well, because that's what I know how to write about. And I said, well, it turns out prostatic hyperplasia is searched by 10 people per month in Colombia. Why make that content when the potential isn't 10, it's 3? So, because remember, if I get to the first, I'm keeping 30. And so what do? That's what happens when you create content by intuition. So if there are data tools that tell me how many people search these specific topics, I need to make my decisions based on the data. But on the left, you see a 22. The 22 represents, there's a term called the keyword difficulty, the level of difficulty of the keyword. If I want to compete with lawyers in El Salvador, and in this case, the level of difficulty is 22 in a case from 0 to 100. And so what it's telling me is it won't be easy to compete. It's not tremendously difficult, but it won't be so easy. That 22 is the level of difficulty, and this is based on who is in the first 10 positions. And so these softwares help us not only to make the decision of whether it's worthwhile to write content on a given topic, but if I'm already involved in the subject, how easy it is to beat the people in the top 10. That's what keyword difficulty is. And so this is a software that, for those of you who want to go into more detail, I can give you this. Ahrefs can give us that information. And so when I tell you don't create content by intuition, that's what I'm referring to. Don't build content on intuition. You should do it based on data, so that you really work on something effective, so that you create content that someone will actually consume. And so define your topics based on data. Once you've defined these topics through data, there's something important. Please, if you want to get involved in this, have someone responsible. Make someone responsible for this. And don't make 5 people in your dispatch read every text. If 5 people are going to read the texts, you're never going to get anything done, because the 5 of them write differently, the 5 of them like different things, and the content, it's the same reason I like this sweater. I like this sweater. The same thing happens with content. And so give one person the power to make decisions, because if you make 5 people review the texts, you'll never publish anything. I'll tell you that because of what we've experienced. And then there's a technical aspect of this. As I mentioned, please remember the importance of the download speed. If you could create the best article, better than Wikipedia. But if your page does not load quickly, Google will not put you in the first positions. So the load speed of a website is fundamental. Remember, 3 seconds it has to load. Where can you see how long your website takes to load? Google has a platform called the Google Page Speed Test, free as well. So you enter, you write the URL, and Google will tell you if it works or if it doesn't. So it's very important to keep that in mind. That's what I want to mention from a technical perspective. Here I have something that's quite interesting for you to assess. I pulled up the word lawyers for Ecuador, abogados para Ecuador. This is what happens in the top 10 positions of lawyers in Ecuador. The first is abogadosecuador.com.se, another Corral Rosales. The third is called Ecuador. I don't know. So here you have the 10. There's something that it's important for you to know, and it is that each URL of each website has an authority from 0 to 100. If you don't know what a URL is, each website has an authority from 0 to 10 to 100. The sum of the authorities of all of the websites all of the pages on your website build something that is called the domain authority. It turns out there's a very important variable for you to know, which is that you can create marvelous content, but if the authority of your websites is very low, this is measured as the level of trust that Google feels with to your website. And so if it's very low, it's not very feasible for you to ever get to the top positions. Where can we see that? There are free softwares that give you that information. So here in this column we can see domain rating, DR, and then URL rating. And so the softwares will give us the authority of each page and the authority of the entire domain. When we want to compete, in the case of lawyers, for example, if we wanted to compete, we know that there are websites that have authorities from 3 to 89 and authorities in the URLs, it's to say from each of the pages from 0 to 13. This is important, yes. It's important for you to know that this exists, and you know that someone spoke to you at some point about the authority levels of websites, and it's important to add this and keep it in mind. Here I showed you the subject of velocity. Here Google would send you this and the speed test, and here this page that I use says that the indicator of speed is 30. This is to say this website is dead. Google's not going to put it in on the first levels, even if you're making the best content. Then there's the subject of the creation of articles. as I've said here, each article has to be created with SEO techniques. For those of you who want to see, I can send you a URL so you can see, and I can teach you how to create the content. If I want to be positioned on the word intellectual property in the URL, those words should be present. In the title, it should be present. In the first paragraph, it should say, in bold, the intellectual property should be said multiple times within the text. There should be links to other websites. The website has to have links to the pages where this is posted. So there are certain variables that the writer must keep in mind in order to have a greater likelihood of appearing in search results. After this, we publish the content. Now, once the content is posted on the websites of your dispatches, what must be done? That content, ideally, has to be put on social networks. As I mentioned, I put it on LinkedIn, 5 tips for selection of dispatch and registering your brands. That text on LinkedIn I can put on Facebook, I can put on LinkedIn, I can put it on Instagram, I can create a video and put it on my Instagram stories. I can create a video and upload it to TikTok. And so that text becomes a hook to attract people to the website. And so that people will interact and learn about your offices. And finally, I've created the content, I have the subjects, I have it published on my website, I've uploaded content, I have it on social networks. How do I measure whether or not this is actually working? The most important platform is called the Google Search Consult. It's not Google Analytics like many people are accustomed, where people see it and no. To know if this works, the platform is Google Search Consult. That's the platform where you'll be able to know if that content is working, Google is placing it, and what position you're being placed at, with what words you're showing up on search results, and that'll give you everything. And so in this manner, keeping all of this in mind, you set up your strategy, you start to post content, and you start to receive traffic toward your websites. And what's important is that you capitalize on this content through qualified leads, so that you don't have to constantly be making publicity, and so that you can receive more and more clients every day. For those of you who want to go into detail on the subject, I can send you links to the webinars so that you can learn more about the subject. If you have people in your offices who want to learn or who you think can learn, you can write to me, and normally I'm addicted to my emails. I try to answer every day to try to help people. Edna, I'm in your hands. Edna had questions. She said she had a lot of questions before beginning, because I had already talked to her about the subject. So I am all ears, and thank you.
Hola. Juan Carlos, mil gracias por esta exposición tan...
Thank you for this interesting presentation. That's so useful to all of us who are always looking to get more clients and loyalty. I wanted to ask, you mentioned the subject of the error of creating content by intuition. Now, what do you think is the biggest error that we make as lawyers when marketing? And on another end, you mentioned that each of us in each of our offices is a brand. In this regard, what's your perception of what we need to focus on? Because I guess we're looking for client loyalty for the dispatch. What do you think we should give priority to? The corporate brand, the personal brand? What's your opinion? So the first one, and so as I mentioned here, the world of doctors is afraid of marketing. And I think this is related to the second one, because they feel that if they make publicity, their brand will be negatively impacted. And so what I think, and what I've always thought, is that a lawyer never makes publicity because it's not well seen, or and I think with what we've talked about today, if you analyze this is a completely different way of making publicity, because finally what you're seeing is publicity through content and value content. And so I'll give you another example. You are good at intellectual property in El Salvador. You this is what you work on. You write about topics related to intellectual property. You can write about them, publish them on your website, and send an email to all of your clients saying, hey, I wrote this text about the recent trends in intellectual property, and look at what happens automatically. Because if the subject is interesting and attractive, people will read the content, and that will help you tremendously to improve your reputation. This is a way that I think can be very subtle. And in addition, the different people in El Salvador will start to read on these subjects and finish articles. It's marvelous, because that will bring more clients, of course. And I think that this is related to the second point that you've just asked about. What's more important, the personal brand or the corporate brand? And I think the sum of our personal brands are what put together our collective brands in the world of lawyers that I know. If there are 5 eminent lawyers on intellectual property in one firm, then the brand of that firm will grow. Now, what does a lawyer do today to build their personal brand? I can't really say. I don't know. Which ones of you have a good personal brand, not because of what you win in courts or what you a personal brand has to be built based on the sharing of knowledge. As I just gave you the example, I think if I'm a person who really dominates these subjects and shares this knowledge, and it's posted on the websites of the dispatches, that has to help both your brand and the brand of the company or the firm. I think one is not more important than the other. I think both complement one another, and there must be balance. But I would invite you to try one day to write a text, a really good text, on a subject. And I know all of you enjoy writing. You write and you read all day. And so try one day, write a text, upload it to a website of your office, and send the link to your clients. And you'll see the perception from your clients when they read the text, so long as the text is good. But I do suggest you try this, and you'll see what happens. Thank you, Juan Carlos. We have a couple of minutes for questions. I don't know if anyone has a question. Can you help us with microphones? Good morning, Juan Carlos. We are a legal tech from Ecuador, working on creating a separate brand, basically brands that have an impact on YouTube. We have about 500,000 views per month, generating a lot of attraction to our website, but we are failing on our website. We just contracted a CTO. Our load time is 5 seconds, and we saw the problem that you just showed. In the CTO, we've implemented the OKRs, and the goal was for the website to load in 2 seconds, but we were told with WordPress and WooCommerce, initially we had made our website on our CRM or Bitrix. We can't make something so fast that we had to do it in HTML. The question is, where would you suggest to go for a website that loads in 2 seconds? Well, the question that he's asking is a very technical one. As you can see, 5 of the terms that he used are very technical, and I understand what you're talking about. But what he's asking is the following. The first thing is there a software engineer here or a systems engineer? All of them will get you into trouble and tell you no. A systems engineer, the first thing they'll tell you is no. And so the question that he's asking is, if I'm going to set up a website, what should I set it up in? Now, why the question? And many of you will ask what that even means. I try to make comparisons always. If you're going to write a text, you can write it on Microsoft Word, or what's Google's? I don't remember the name. Google Docs. And so I write the text, and it's in any of these documents. In the digital world, there are different platforms with which we can set up websites. If you want to set up a website for content that stores content, there's nothing better than WordPress. And don't think of creating everything in HTML. What does his question mean? Here's another comparison. We can set up a presentation in PowerPoint where I can use a pattern of slides, a perfectly established one. I load it from Microsoft, the pattern I have, or I can set up per website or a pattern of different slides. Now, what he's telling me is that the systems engineer told him to develop a pattern of slides that is specific to his website. What does that imply? That if we have to modify the website, every time I have to modify it, we need a developer to help with that. And so that's completely false. You can have a website on WordPress optimized with speeds below 3 seconds. And I recommend, remember this is important, when you're developing a website, like what I just mentioned, that is going to store content, make them on WordPress. Don't let anyone tell you that there's a platform called Wix, or there's now the HubSpot that's trending now. There's a bunch. No, don't make an HTML, because you would lose all of the support, the knowledge from so many companies that can help you solve speed problems. How do we fix a speed problem? What does it depend on? As I just said, the pattern of slides that we use, and in a simple manner, if I create a pattern in PowerPoint that has a high resolution photo, and I put the photo on all of the slides, then the weight of the presentation will be 100 megs. The same thing happens on the internet. If I start to upload photos of very high quality onto the website, imagine a person trying to download high quality photos. So the first thing you have to do is upload a good resolution photo, but optimized, because that's the main cause of speed problems. And be careful with the template, which is like the pattern of basically the template that you use. When you select the template, go to Google and search for reviews of this template for SEO and speed. I can send you a template that we use, which works very well when we've been asked for recommendations. But don't do what the engineer is telling you, that you have to do everything on HTML. Don't do that. You had a question.
Don't worry.
Gracias, Juan Carlos.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. The presentation has been very interesting. I have a question regarding an example that showed up in results. There was a directory that showed up, and that the results have show many directories or their sites in first places. Do you think there's value in building content like guides, articles in these directories? So the question she's asking is important, and I'll tell you why. Google already is clear. They know when someone searches for a subject, they know what the adequate response is. Adequate response in terms of the type of website that they should be showing. I'll give you an example. I guarantee in every country, if you search with the word cellular, the first 10 positions are not text websites talking about cell phones. No, they're e-commerce platforms, because Google knows that people who search for cell phones usually want to buy. So when you're going to define those subjects, and this is a bit more advanced, you have to look who is showing up on the first 10 positions in order to see if by creating content I could be there, because usually those first 10 positions are usually content platforms. And so the question is, what happens, and is it useful for me to create a directory for intellectual property when, in the case I showed you, we had Abogados Ecuador, which was a searcher for lawyers. And so the question is, you have to check if the first 10 positions are all searchers, because if on that keyword Google knows that what people is looking for are searchers, then the only way that you can compete with that keyword is by creating a searcher for lawyers. I'll give you an example. We worked with a company in the United States, a real estate company. Every time you search apartments in Miami, in the first 10 positions, you see search engines for properties. And so we'll never get to first place by writing a text about apartments in Miami. What we have to do is look closely at who are in those first 10 positions on Google to see if what I want to do is feasible or not. Do you understand what I'm describing? And so this is called the search intention. If it's a search intention that is transactional, if it's a search intention that is informative. Who defines that? Google. Google knows with each keyword what people are looking for. Are they searching for a property or a cell phone catalog, or are they looking to buy, so it would only give you e-com platforms, or are they looking to read, and so it should show you text? Any other question or something? We're out of time. Okay, so now you have my mail there, and basically I'm here trying to help, and hopefully this opens your mind around what we could do from a lawyer firm. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Juan Carlos. Gracias.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. And hopefully we can ask you questions once we're outside. I'm sorry we're a little bit behind schedule, so you have some time. And now in 2 or 3 minutes we'll begin the next workshop. For those of you who are here.